We're on page 34, more about alcoholism. Let me go back to the previous page real quick. Potential alcoholics, okay. As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success, little chance. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remain sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, and most of them within a few weeks. Resolution is a firm decision. Yeah, I didn't want to quit drinking as long as I could control it. If I could control it, I didn't really have a real reason to quit drinking. It was only when I couldn't stop and I was so sick that I needed to stop that I really wanted to stop. I didn't really want to stop until I needed to stop. And then when I needed to stop, I couldn't stop. And that's when I knew I was a real alcoholic. So that's what it's saying. If you want to stop and you can stop without God, without a spiritual program of action, without any help, and just white knuckle it dry on your own with no help, then you even if you can stop for a year, you still might be a potential alcoholic. That's what it's saying. And if you're making a really firm decision to quit drinking and you decide you're gonna quit drinking and you really mean it, but you end up drunk anyway, then it's saying a real that's I think that's indicative of a real alcoholic. So there's a difference between all the different types of alcoholics. It's almost like there's a progression of alcoholism, and you could be categorized in that. So, when I was a young person and I drank and I could drink and stop whenever I wanted to, I didn't even get sick or hungover. And as time went by, I started getting sick and it wasn't too bad and I could handle it. But, over the years, I kept drinking more and getting sick. See, but yet stands for you're eligible to. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. So let's say you want to control how much you drink, but you don't even know if you're really an alcoholic, but that's what you want. We're assuming, of course, the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit on a non spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not, what level you're at. Many of us felt we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish. So we had mental strength and a moral strength and fortitude, and we really, honestly, seriously desired to stop forever, and then we couldn't. That's like probably the earmark of alcoholism. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us or not? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. Because the main problem of an alcoholic centers in his mind. If they can show us and demonstrate to us the types of thinking that come before a person actually picks up a drink, then if you can relate to that, you're probably closer to being able to self-diagnose as a real alcoholic. For obviously, this is the crux of the problem. This is the essence of the problem, the main problem in the mind. Okay. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? So the the desperate experiment, page 31. Page 31. Oh, we cross-referenced to that earlier. Yeah, we already cross-referenced that. Our first example is a friend we should call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He has a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. So this guy had everything going for him. He didn't have any problems. He didn't, nobody died. He wasn't poor and broke and struggling and depressed. He had everything going. He had high honor. Everybody liked him. He was smart. The only thing that anyone could tell was he was a little bit nervous and shaky. And he didn't even start as an alcoholic. He didn't maybe he drank when he was young and he was able to stop and he just didn't keep going. So he had somewhat some self-control somewhere. But wow, he didn't even touch a drink. He didn't drink at all probably till he was 35, and then when he started he couldn't stop. So some of us have um the allergy in us right off the bat. Some of us develop the allergy as we go in life, so we're predisposed to become an alcoholic because we're born with it. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he lost through drinking. See, it didn't tell you all that. In a few years, he lost the automobile agency that he owned. He lost his family, and probably a lot more. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life, deepen and strengthen, and continue learning and growing. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. To his amazement, he got drunk about 6 or 7 times in a row. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what happened. So he would get drunk and he would get in contact with someone in AA, and they would go through this happened and this happened and this, and they'd follow the tape and the consequences all the way through, and they'd go back out and do it again. And then he'd come back in and they'd go over everything that happened again. Then he'd go back out and do it again. He did that like half a dozen times, 6 times in a row. He agreed he was a real alcoholic, so he knew he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he'd lose his family, for whom he had deep affection. So he had love. He had something to lose besides his life. If he knew he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition, he knew that his health was deteriorating quickly and he could lose his life. He knew that was going to get locked up. He knew that he would lose his family. He knew all those things, and it wasn't enough to stop him, yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly what happened. This is his story. Okay, I came to work on Tuesday morning. It's important. Look, if someone tells you I had some sobriety and I went back out and this is what happened to me, pay attention to that because I always pay attention to that because I want to know what not to do as much as I want to know what to do. I remember I came to work on Tuesday morning. Okay. So you already got there Monday. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be the salesman for a concern, a business I once owned. No doubt. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. So he's got a resentment. He's unaware or he hasn't worked through. I had a few words with the boss. Then I decided to drive into the country to see one of my prospects for a car, a possible sale he was going to make. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I'd been going to it for years. So somewhere he's lying to himself subconsciously. He's going to old playmates and playgrounds, and his motives for going there are, yeah, it's okay if they have a bar. I've been here before. I'm just going to get a sandwich. I'm not going to actually. Which is why I won't do that. I don't want to test myself anymore. No, God, please. I sat down at a table. I ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. Why is that sense there? I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. So while he's eating a sandwich and drinking this milk, he is saying to himself, I'm not going to drink. See, I had a sandwich and a glass of milk, and I still didn't have a thought of drinking, so I ordered another glass of milk. It's like a test. He's testing himself. Suddenly, I don't think it's real suddenly as we think. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but I felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well. See, he knew it was an experiment from the beginning. He was testing himself and he knew it. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. I've been there, done that. Not whiskey and milk, but let me see if I can just take one sip. Okay, let me see if I can just take 2 sips. Okay, let me see if I can just have a half, and still playing games with trying to figure out if I could find a way to, control my disease of alcoholism, which is not, it's insane to try to say to myself, let me see if I can control something that is genetically bred into my body. I have a physical allergy and a mental, and let me just see if I could change that. It's like saying, let me try to eat more sugar and maybe I can not be a diabetic. You know, you can't think your way out of it. There's some kind of pathway that's built into, I think, alcoholics' brains that we got this thinking that's just kind of ingrained in there that we got to unwind and untangle that so that we don't keep thinking that way, you know. It's funny, we all have kind of the same thinking. Thus start one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of the intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It's almost like I got this pride in me that says I don't want to admit that I got a problem. So let me see if I can manipulate and circumstances. You know what I mean? Can't whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion, unbalanced, mentally unbalanced, of the inability to think straight is what lack of proportion is, be called anything else? Extreme foolishness or irrationality, mental obsession. You may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not far fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. Wow. I thought it was just only me. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning. There inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. Okay, break it down. The curious mental phenomenon is the obsession. The obsession that we can think our way into becoming an into not being an alcoholic, being not a physical alcoholic. That's what it is. Insanely trivial, a really small, tiny excuse. Our logic, our intellect didn't it didn't it didn't engage. My brain didn't engage. Yeah. And the next day, honestly wondering what happened. Go through that over and over again every day. That's pretty awful way to live. It's hell. Okay, so yeah. In some circumstances, we've gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. But even in this type of beginning, we're obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be. Oh, Lord. So that means self-righteous indignation. Oh, I have a right to get drunk because someone that I love died. I had a right to get drunk because I was mad or depressed or, I drank because I got mad at God. And it says there was a little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the consequences would be. So when I uh intentionally got drunk this last time, I did it on purpose. And there was just I thought, I thought I thought I would end up, just not making it back. And I didn't really care what the consequences were. So you don't, but when you're not intentionally getting drunk, when you accidentally go through, like the obsession kicks in and you accidentally get drunk, you seem to reflect more on the consequences than if you deliberately do it. That's what it's kind of saying. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. Okay, it's ridiculous and mystifying. We need to play the tape all the way through. We cannot think our way through or out of, we cannot think our way out of a mental obsession. We can only take the necessary and appropriate actions that will change our way of thinking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast moving vehicles. I used to do that. Me and my friend Becky, we used to run down the middle of the street, and we'd run down, and when a car came, we would, right before we hit the car, we would jump over into the other lane. I don't know how we lived through that. It was insane. It was at nighttime too. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as foolish. This is the deliberate drinker. Him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Strange. Back then, queer meant strange. Luck then deserts him and he's slightly injured several times in succession in a row. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently he's hit again, and this time is a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he's decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks he breaks both legs. Promises to stop or slow down. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways, but the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine which breaks his back. Such a man would be called crazy, wouldn't he? Would he be mentally insane? But we don't want anyone to think we got a problem with our perfect selves. It's so perfect. You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, The illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Okay? We've been through a lot of difficult experiences. We who have been through a lot of difficult experiences. So that visualization would fit us. Insane. Insane. A state of mind that prevents normal perception, behavior, or social interaction. Seriously mentally ill. Back then, we didn't, it was really being mentally ill back then meant you were going to get locked up. And now they just let you run free and do whatever you want. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, mental features, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. God, been there, done that. We have not lost everything in life through drinking yet, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. That's trying to say self knowledge will fix it, and it won't. It has to be action. That may be true of certain non alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self knowledge. This is the point we wish to emphasize and reemphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Oh, God. Let us take another illustration. Oh, my God, what is this? Page 2 is I got some references here and I don't know why. Hold on. Our brains and body. Potential alcoholic is page 34. Unable to stop drinking on self-knowledge is page 149. Let's look that one up. What? Page unable to stop drinking at page 149. It might be a different. Wow. I don't know. Must be a different. Maybe it's page 49. Oh, shit. Must not be that important. Page 23 is the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. And then page 33 is once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Yeah. Okay, Fred is, oh, poor Fred. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. Successful, his income's good, he has a fine home, he's happily married, he's the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearances, he is stable, well-balanced individual. Yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters, that shakes. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself He came to the hospital to rest his nerves. The doctor he implied strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few days he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so in spite of his good character and standing. Wow. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem. He made up his mind to quit drinking, and he never thought he couldn't do it. He was kind of leaning on, I'm a good person, I have good morals, I can do this. He didn't believe he was an alcoholic, and so because he didn't know that and he didn't have that gift of desperation, he wasn't going to do anything about it. The reason it takes so much, okay, let me just say for me, it took so much for me to be willing to do the work because I'm lazy. I didn't want to do the work. Who wants to, have to do all this stuff? Nobody wants to have to do it unless they have to. So if you're a real alcoholic and you don't have any other choice left, this is the last house on the block, man. This is the end of the road. Good moral character, honesty, trustworthiness, diligence, reliability, respect, integrity, discretion, candor, absence of hatred and discrimination, mental and emotional stability. That's what good moral character is. He had all that. Even with all these spiritual principles and moral principles he didn't know how to apply them. And he really meant business. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. So conceded, he admitted he's got some of the signs of alcoholism, but as long as you don't have to ask for help, then there's no humility there. And we alcoholics have a problem with pride. Okay, we all do. He was positive that his humiliating experience, plus the knowledge he had acquired, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. A humiliating experience is a good start, but it's not a continuation of learning how to practice the principles. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told his most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all his other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. I used to think that these stories about, the alcoholics going to the hospital was mental. I never really realized how physically debilitating and sick I really, really got. Really sick. So he was intelligent, he had good judgment, he had strong willpower, he was determined, he was everything else, and this is the only thing that got to him. Finally, wow. Never say never. The subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. Okay, let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. But I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. Holy crap. I feel convicted. I reasoned that I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. That's pride. Look, he was smarter and stronger and had more willpower, and he would succeed where they failed. It's a progressive disease. Over time, it gets worse, never better. I felt I had every right to be self confident, that it would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. Cautious, alert. How terrible. In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. So maybe he kept it in the front of his mind, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink. Be vigilant, be careful, you know what I mean? I had no trouble refusing drinks. I'm sure back then, people were drinking all the time, drinking and smoking everywhere. In this frame of mind, I went about my business. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard work of a simple matter. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. Wow, this guy is smart. I'd been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about it. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased. I knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Wow. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail and my meal, then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxicab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went, what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. Alcohol kills pain. Okay, so we have things in us that could trigger us, but we don't even know what they all are. Not everybody knows what all their triggers are. He said as he crossed the threshold of his dining room, almost as if that was the trigger, the threshold of crossing into his dining room was the trigger that said, okay, yeah, now, he probably usually had a drink with his after his meal, and he probably usually had a walk after dinner, and he probably went to a bar that he'd been to before. It's probably a hotel he'd been to before. Okay, but doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He didn't have a plan of action in place. You know, and no program. I hear nothing about God in here. Nothing. And he blacked out. Some of us were blackout drunks. I don't remember most of my life. Most of my life was a blackout drunk, and that's because the reason I drank was to forget. That's why I drank. I drank to forget. I wanted to forget my entire childhood And anytime I had another uh, mental or emotional injury, it was piled on top of stuff that was piled on top of stuff that was piled on top of undealt with and unresolved trauma from the past. And it was so much, I could not mentally handle it. So when I say I drank to escape, I mean I drank to escape for real. And it wasn't just because I didn't have coping mechanisms, it's because I have complex post traumatic stress disorder. I was raised and bred and lived and breathed survival. And that's how I was raised. There was a lot of violence, a lot of being close to death. It's a hard way to live. So, but this guy, he didn't have all that as far as I know. It doesn't really tell you what their childhood was like, if they had underlying issues or not. But the he obviously had the physical allergic reaction to alcohol. Most people don't do that. A normal person will drink maybe a half a drink, maybe one and a half, and they don't like it the way it makes them feel and they stop. As soon as I regained my ability to think, wow, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. So after he passed out, after he got drunk, blacked out, went around for days, blacked out, passed out, then came the hospital. So he probably woke up in a hospital in some pain, mental and physical pain. It was so painful for me. Oh my God. I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences as at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. So when things were going good and going his way, you know, it caught him off guard. Yeah. I now remember what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come. I would drink, play the tape all the way through. No defense. So we have no defense against the first drink. God is our defense against the first drink. Conscious contact with God. They said that though I did raise the defense, that it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. I think every reason is a trivial reason for drinking for an alcoholic. Well, just that did happen and more, for what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind. I saw the willpower and self knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. Strange mental blank spots. A memory lapse, dissociation, disconnection from reality. We escape our own brains. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then. Demoralized. It was a crushing blow. I can imagine the higher up you are in the social ladder, if you have a great home and a family and a business and a great life, and suddenly alcohol cuts your legs out from underneath you, it's twice as hard as someone who never really had anything to lose to begin with. Two of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much, and then asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede, admit to both propositions. He admitted both statements. Yes, he finally admitted he was an alcoholic. He finally admitted that he was beat, okay? And then after that he did that, then they piled on heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. Stacks of papers. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen, and then they quoted them from their own selves and memories, plus the physical, tangible evidence that he could see and read. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself, the last little flame of hope he had. So it's not enough just to say, hey, I know what you're going through. I've been there, done that, and this is what helped for me. That's not enough. You got to have some kind of physical, tangible evidence that someone like you, or have a doctor tell you, you have someone tell you that knows what they're talking about, that you ain't gonna make it, man. And then when all your hope is gone, you're willing to do whatever it takes to stay alive. Then they outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully, though I had been only a nominal churchman. I don't know what nominal means, sorry. Their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. Their ideas and plans weren't out of, they weren't too hard, but the program of action, though, entirely realistic, was pretty drastic. Entirely sensible was pretty drastic. I mean, I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. So the ideas and the beliefs he lived by. So my ideas and my beliefs that I live by, like, you know, gosh, I don't know. I don't want to say. That's kind of embarrassing. You know, we have to change our thinking. The way that we think didn't work, obviously. But the moment, okay, that was not easy, but the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. So once you're 100% willing to go through all the steps and do it all for honestly, sincerely, you shouldn't have that gnawing thing inside of you that's afraid that you're going to go do what you always do because you got a plan in front of you. You got a purpose now. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. All of them. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could. So my worst day sober is better than my best day drunk. Infinitely, without limit, more satisfying, more rewarding, and enjoyable than the life that you used to live. So eventually, if you're in recovery and you're going through the steps and it's really hard and I know it's really tough, but eventually you should get to a point where your life is more satisfying and more rewarding than it was before when you were drinking. So if my life isn't getting better, then I'm not doing something right. Okay. And so, yeah, it's an inward deal. So when I get the inward happiness, the outward circumstances aren't really going to affect me so much. But let me just say, yeah, my life is better now than it's ever been. And I don't have much stuff. I'm pretty poor, but I have peace of mind. I don't have to live in hell anymore. I would not go back to it even if I could. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems. Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. Wow. One of these men, staff member of a world renowned hospital, recently made the statement to some of us: what you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to two of you men whose stories I have heard, there's no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless, apart from divine help. Had you offered yourself as patients to this hospital, I would not have taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. An alcoholic mentality is denial, rationalization, blame shifting, self pity, perfectionism, aggression, impulsivity, risky behavior, and all or nothing mentality. And then we'll be on the agnostics next. Still doing the deal.